A reading from the Hebrew Scriptures. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, one whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has brought forth. Then the rest of his kindred shall return to the people of Israel, and he shall stand and feed his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall live secure. For now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be the one of peace. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
I heard a preacher talking about Christmas this week. I say he was talking, but really he was shouting. So trying to cover my ears but still hear, I did pick up one word that was startling: invasion. He yelled about the coming of God into the world at Christmas, calling it a divine invasion. The words we use about our faith betray our beliefs and also undergird our behavior. This warlike language is all too common these days in Christianity. But it's more astonishing even when it's used to speak about the birth of Christ. I mean, think of how Luke tells us the story of the Annunciation, for instance. When the angel comes to this poor young girl, she is barely a woman. The angel tells her, first of all, not to fear, then announces God's intentions. And the back and forth in this conversation between heaven and earth is nothing if not a picture of gentleness, huh? It all leads to that extraordinary moment of consent by Mary. God will not come into the world by force. God will court us. God will wait for us. God will come forth from among us. Come forth is the phrase Micah uses in his prophecy about the Messiah's appearing from the little town of Bethlehem. From you shall come forth one who is to rule Israel, he says. God's servant comes forth from among us. God doesn't come upon us as if from the outside by invasion to conquer us. God comes forth from among us. This is the same prophet, you may remember one chapter earlier, who tells us that when God's anointed one appears from Bethlehem, the peoples will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, and nations shall not lift up sword against nations, neither shall they learn war anymore. Doesn't sound like an invasion to me. Sounds like a God who has been with us all along, who is no stranger to this world. A God whose love is at long last finding a way to come forth into full view, and even then, in such a way that it seems so very ordinary and normal. Micah sees the Messiah as a ruler who serves, one who feeds the flock like a good shepherd. He shall be the one of peace. Where then do we see God at work in our world today? Our language becomes a lens through which we see. And if our language is about power and conquest, as the word invasion suggests, we might think we see God in things like, what shall we say? Angry parents who are breathing threats and calling for good and faithful teachers and administrators to be fired if they don't do what we want. But if our language is about love and consent, as persuasion suggests, we might just see God among us in the generosity of gifts given from the angel tree, say, or in the melting down of bullets into jewelry, say, or in the serving of meals to the homeless, or in the getting vaccinated, or in the quiet attempts to find common ground with those we disagree with. I had a visit recently here at Wilshire from a person of peace who literally came from Bethlehem. It's turnabout fair play because my partner at Faith Commons, Rabbi Nancy Caston, and I took a group to Bethlehem a few years ago where we met with the Reverend Mitri Rahab, who is a Palestinian Christian and a Lutheran pastor in Bethlehem. Mitri has been deeply discouraged about the way the state of Israel virtually smothers the life out of Palestinians and snuffs out their hopes. These Palestinian peoples, like Mitri, are native to the land, a land that includes places like the West Bank town of Bethlehem itself, and yet they are treated as if they are enemies in their own land. Being a man of peace, Mitri doesn't stoke the conflict with words of war, let alone join those other Palestinians who would take up arms to harm Jewish neighbors in return. Instead, he began a university in Bethlehem called Dar al-Kalima, which specializes in teaching young people the arts and culture. He believes the only way to defeat the forces of force is through greater imagination of alternatives that are peaceful. The arts are not threatening on the face of things, but they are subversive, don't you know? They invite us to imagine a different way in the world. I mean, imagine leaders who understand things like harmony, right? Balance, beauty. What if our world were ruled by leaders like that? This is where I see God at work today, still coming forth from Bethlehem, the one over there in Palestine, and the Bethlehem even here among us. This is always and only where the one of peace is found.